Hi, welcome to the Saltcorn video about users and authorization. Authorization is the facility that you have in an app for restricting some of the things you can see or some of the things you can do, such that some of the users can see or do it and others can't. So because you have different roles, different types of user groups. In application security, this is sort of the other side of the coin is authentication, which is about how you prove your identity, how you log in and establish who you are as a user. And I won't cover this in this video. I think we'll do a separate video about that topic in Saltcorn. Part of the reason for postponing that in Saltcorn is because when you set up an application, you set up a new application, you already have a user authentication system. It's very simple. It's just log in with email and password, and you can customize that in Saltcorn. But what you get in the basic application that you set up is usually good enough for a first prototype of whatever app you're building. So we'll deal with how to customize the login flow and the different identity providers in a different video. And in this video, I want to focus on how you can restrict parts of your application, part of your data, parts of the user interface, such that it can only be accessed by some users. And this is something that you have to do in every Saltcorn application that you build. You have to then, once you've built your basic views and set up your basic tables, you have to then think about what kinds of users am I going to let into my app, and what can they do, and what can the person who hasn't logged in at all, hasn't authenticated, what can they do, what can they see? So this is sort of a necessary step even for building a prototype application. So here I have a new application. I've just created this, and there are no tables, views, pages. I haven't created any content, but you always get a users table in your list of tables, and that holds your, it holds, it's a standard table. It holds a row for every user that you have in your system, and you can create views and triggers based on this. But you can also administer your users here under the users tab in the settings menu. And here I have my list of users. I can now create a new user. So let's just create one here for Sam at saltcorn.com, and you'll notice that I have to create that with a role. And here I can choose any role here, but let's pick user. And now I'm going to create that. I picked random password, and then I get a notification here popping up, and the idea is, I can pick this, copy it, and then I can send it to Sam in some sort of instant messaging or whatever. And now Sam can log in the standard login menu and do all the stuff that you've built. So when we created this user, we set it to be the role user. And so the role-based access control is the simplest way that you can do some sort of access control, where you can say that some users can do something that other users cannot. So in Saltcorn, every user has to belong to one role, and the roles are in a strict order, such that every role can do things that all of the roles below it can do, but there are some things that the roles above it can do that that role cannot do. So for instance, here in the default setup, you have 4 roles: admin, staff, user, and public. And there'll be some things that staff can do that users cannot, but everything that user can do, staff can also do. So this is with the simplest role-based access control. Once we see the different methods for access control, then there'll be some exceptions to that, and that's the point. The role-based system is where you start, and then when that starts breaking down, when there's some access rule that you want to have, that you can't express, then you go to some different system. But here we start off with these 4 roles. I can create new roles. One thing that we need to understand is that almost all of these are special apart from the staff role. The staff role you can just delete. It's like any other role that you add. But admin is special because admin is the user who gets all this other great stuff, and they can build applications and do lots of stuff. They essentially have full control of the application. User here is the role that new users get assigned to. I think you can change that somewhere, but by default this is when a new user signs up. This is the role that they get. And public is also a special role in that is the way we're talking about users who haven't logged in at all. So entities that are set to a role to access to public, anyone can see them without being logged in, right? So that's where you get your public content. And typically there aren't any users who have this role. This is like everyone who has a company, so they're your customers. So you have to decide when you start building an application and start thinking about these roles, and you have to decide what they mean. And typically, you have to make some choice about, does user mean the customers of my application, or does that mean the entry-level employees at my company? So that's just something that you have to decide for yourself when you start thinking about this. So let's make a user for let's just create a role for someone who is more senior than a user but not as senior as staff. So this could be like between staff and public. Let's pick 60. Okay, so we're just gonna say role 60 and partner. So now partners can do everything that user can do, but there may be some things that staff can't do. Okay, so everything that you build in Saltcorn now gets a role to access. So pages that we saw before, let's create a page here because this is a new system. That page will have a minimum role, and that's what you need to have at least that role to access that entity. So here it's admin, so that would create a page that only people with the admin role can access, because there's no one above admin. But you could set it to something else. So you could set this to partner, and that would mean that partner, staff, and admin can access this, but not user and public. All right, and then we just say like hello partner. Right, so that is now, I can run that page and I list that here as role to access. Similar with views, if we create, well, let's create some tables. I want to, for this application, I want to create I actually want to create a simple blogging system, because that can be quite nice in terms of setting some of these access rules. So let's see if I can create a blogging system in 2 minutes. So we have a blog post, and that has a text body, and we're not gonna bother with, no, maybe we will do, let's say that has the title string, so that's the title of the blog post, but then I want a nice editor, so I go to the TinyMCE, install that, and that gives me access to some more types of fields. So now by installing TinyMCE, that also installed the HTML extension. So this is the post body. Okay, so let's just get started here. So let's create some basic views for our very simple blog. And first, let's set this to be the TinyMCE editor. I'm going to swap the order of these. Yeah, that's looking better. My first post. Okay, this is my first blog post. I've got that. So let's just make this so let's just make this more like a blog. Okay, so now we've got our blog post, and I actually want to create a feed because that's a little bit nicer. Okay, let's build this feed view, which will show the show views one after another. So it'll be roughly something like this. So now I claim that I have the world's simplest, or maybe not, blog. And I've got here the one post after another. To the menu. So now I've got my posts here. All right. So now this is somewhere where we can experiment with the different user roles. So first of all, you will notice that if we become Sam, who's a user, or even if we log out and become public, well, we can't see anything, in fact. So let's look. And so now let's set some things here. So in order to let users or even public see these posts, we need to set them to all of them to public. So any page that you want to embed your view in, which you don't have to do, you can run views directly. That needs to have the role to access. The view needs to have the role to access. Any view that's embedded in another view. So if we've got, in the feed, we've both got a link to edit and we've got a embedding of the show. So they all need to be the role that you want to run. And then the table has its role to access, and that needs to be available, accessible as well. So let's make it so that everyone can read these tables and read these posts, even if they're not logged in. So like you want for a blog. Okay, so first we have to start by setting the table minimum role to read. So for a table, you get minimum role to read and minimum role to write, and so anyone here can now read these rows, but only admin can write. And in fact, let's make it so that partner can write. So now partners can log in and create new blog posts. And then we need all these views to be public as well. So again, for edit, we can just make this partner as well. List this for the administrator. We don't want anyone to see that. And the feed needs to be public, and the show needs to be public as well. I have a home page, so I need a home page for public, for admin, for public. And that's where the public users will be directed to when they log in. So let's call this public home. And we'll make this accessible to the public, and then we will simply embed our feed. There we go. And you know what, maybe the world's best blog. So maybe we'll make this the H1. It's best to use this one over here. And then we'll go here to this one and make this the H2. So then, just getting a clear typographic hierarchy. Okay, so that is now, I've created that for public, but then I need to set it to the home page for public as well. And now I should be able to log out. There we go. So now I've got my blog here, and everyone can see it, including people who aren't logged in. I've set access roles for differently for reading and writing, and differently for different views. So you can see that as I'm admin, I can do all the things that partner can do, and I can both read and write, but then only the public users, because we've set it up in this way, can read these blog posts. Okay, so I think we're actually almost done talking about roles here. There's very little else to say. You have some settings here for the roles, but they're sort of irrelevant in terms of the access roles. It just lets you set the theme separately. So if you have more than one theme installed, should we have a nice theme? Let's install a different theme. And let's just do that. That's good. Looks good to me. And so now you can set the theme differently. Maybe you want this more dashboard thing here for the admin, but you want everybody else to have like material design. Okay, and here you can set different rules for the two-factor authentication, so users can set up two-factor authentication here. If we had set this to disabled, they wouldn't get that prompt, and if we had set it to mandatory, people would be prompted to create a two-factor code in case they hadn't created one already. But that's sort of not really about what you can access. It's not about authorization. So we're done with roles. We've seen that you can create a hierarchy of roles. It's like you got the bosses at the top, you've got the workers in the middle, and then you have the customers at the bottom, and you can give them more or less access, but it's strictly hierarchical, right? So now let's talk about a different situation. So we made it possible for the partners to create blog posts, but we don't really want one partner. So one partner is like they're people we're working with, but they're not really employees of the company. So we want partners to be able to create blog posts and maybe to edit their own blog posts, but we don't want this to be, we don't want one partner to be able to edit another partner's blog posts. But we do want staff to be able to edit anyone's blog post. For instance, if a partner says something that's inappropriate, off-brand, we need to be able to go in and quickly change that or delete that post. So we need some way that we can say, okay, so that will be accomplished by setting minimum role to write to staff. But now partners can't create blog posts, and staff can edit all blog posts. What we want is something more complicated than what can be accomplished by roles. And we need to be able to say that a partner can create and edit their own blog posts, but not everybody else's. And this is where we go to the next system for authorization, which is only slightly more complicated. And this is the ownership field system for authorization. So here we can say that a certain owner, a certain user owns a certain row, and they can edit that row, but they can't edit other rows in that table. So the way you have to do this is you have to add a field to the table you're interested in. And this is the person who has created this blog post. Let's call it the writer. Oh, let's call it creator. It's often tempting to call this user, but it's important not to do so. For a number of reasons. It's often the word user is introduced in Saltcorn in formulas which we haven't covered yet. The keyword user is used to denote the logged in user, and if you also have a field called user, then that's there's a conflict between the two, and you can't get both of them. Okay, so this is now the creator of the blog post, and we've seen this before, right? So you set the summary field by email. It's good. On delete, I now set delete to cascade most of the time. It feels a little bit scary. It means that if a user is deleted, then all of their posts will be deleted as well. And it is just often the right thing to do, although it sounds a little bit scary. And this we haven't seen yet, but there's a way to have full text search, and you can enable that as well. Okay, so now we have the creator, and that is a field. And let me just quickly go in and let's set Sam to be the creator of this one, and the admin, will be the creator of that one. And that's okay. What do we have to do now? So now we're setting minimum role to read is still public. Everyone can read all blog posts. That's a decision we've made. That's not necessarily the right thing. Maybe you only want users to be able to read blog posts, but that's, it's a public blog for this example. And role to write is staff. So that means if you're staff, then you can always write to this table. There are further rules that can be introduced here, ownership field or ownership formula, which is accessed here. But if this is satisfied, then you have right to write. Then you are able to write. That has to be satisfied, and also the views that you're using to write has to be satisfied as well. So you also have this role has to be satisfied as well. So we'll leave this edit blog post to partner. So all partners can, create a blog post, but they will only own that one row. Okay, so here's the sort of magic, and that is that we choose creator as the ownership field. And that means that if the user who is logged in, if their user ID matches the field creator in a row, then they are the owner of that row, and they're able to read and write that row irrespective of what it says here. So there's a cascade in the checking, and first it goes to check the roles. If the role is satisfied, then you go ahead, you have permission. Otherwise, it checks the ownership field, or if you've set an ownership formula, which we'll see in a second, then that can then allow it as well. Okay, so now the one thing we haven't done is when you create a post, then it doesn't really say, we need to make sure that then it's filled in, right? This creator is filled in. And the way you do that is by going to edit the edit form, and then you go to fixed and blocked fields, and then for the creator here you could select a specific user, but you can also just select preset logged in. So here this means that this field, the creator field, is preset because it's missing, right? So we didn't have, the reason why it appears here is because we did not include a field for it in the actual form. And then here it asks us, well, do you want to fill this in a different way? And yes, we can set the preset creator to be logged in. And that means that now when a person runs that, they will, that field will be filled in with their user ID. So let's see this. If I add better content. So you can see now this is filled in with my user. Now already we may want to show that somewhere, right? So let's create a little value here. Oh, actually what we really want is the join field, because we want to show maybe the email address. I'm going to make it the email address. If you can add fields to the user table, and you could add stuff like full name, so you can use that instead, but I'm just going to use the email here. And then I'm going to put some text front here. And then I'll do a space here. All right, so let's have a look at the feed. Written by, so it's good to be able to, it's good to separate this typographically from so often I like to make this muted. And we could even make it small and muted as well. So that's a little bit clearer here, right? So that's the title, the author. The other thing you need to consider when creating these forms is just to make sure that when you have an edit form, that when the user presses submit or save or whatever your label is, when the user presses the submit button, that they are ending up in the right place. So we've seen this before, but just make sure that on the last page of your edit options here on the edit view, that you are setting the right destination. So that's the place you go when you have successfully submitted a form entry. So you can make it a specific view, but actually what works really well, and I recommend having this as a default, is just to set it to back to referrer. So if you that will be the right thing probably 90% of the time. So I just recommend using that. So here, before we created Sam to be a user, but Sam appears to work at the same company as me. So we will change Sam to be a staff. And then we will create a partner account who will be able to create blog posts. We'll call this person Tim at mozilla.org. And now we can first see what does the site look like for Tim as a partner. So Tim now has, so first of all, Tim has this different theme. and he sees all these posts. We should probably have a header up here that says the title of the blog and also the app name here we could change. But here, so here Tim is able to so, you know, what does Tim want to say? He probably wants to say Firefox. Okay. All right, so now we see Tim's post here. If I sort of want to demonstrate the editing permissions. So if I just log in here, and if on every post on the show, I can do something like add a link to the edit form. Yeah, that's actually correct. So I'll first demonstrate that it sort of does the right thing, and then we can talk about how to hide that. So now Tim is able to use that to edit his own posts. But if he's trying to edit somebody else's post, then he gets a not authorized message here, as he should. You know, if you want that not to show, which you probably do, that link in the here, what you can do is you can put this in a container, and you can put that edit link in the container, and then in the container settings you can do show if, and then there's a tick here that says owner, and now you want it off for the different other roles, and now it will show for the owner. So let's see that. First of all, we see it for all of them, but if we become Tim, we see that edit link only for his own post. Okay, so I think this shows you some of the power of the ownership system. I'd say, look, I don't know what your application is or what you're doing. I'd say for most applications, you start off with the roles, right? Set the roles that you want, and then you're going to hit something where you want to express some sort of permission, and then you then think, can I do this with ownership, right? Can I do it so that one person owns that data row? So that's always, we don't have ownership for views, so that you can't just say, okay, this person has to be able to run this view, but this other person of the same role must not be able to run this view. But we do that in terms of data, and this is checked, you know, everywhere in the Saltcorn system. Apart from, there's some small number of exceptions. You can read our security note about that, but in general, we're checking this at the data layer, and that means that even if a view is set up to, you know, allow you to read some data, then the data will say no, this person does not have access, and so that's the way it should be, I think, and that gives us you know, I guarantee that no matter what you do in the user layer, the data layer will check that you have this right. Now, of course, there are some instances when that fails as well, when you want to express something such that you can't do this with ownership, and that's typically now with a group, some sort of group that is not expressible in terms of roles. So typically, let's say in a company, you may have a human resources department and you may have a finance department, and you know, your company, you have a certain structure and a certain hierarchy. There's the boss at the top, and you know, various cascades down, and you have people at the same level, right? You have a, let's say, a mid-level manager, both in finance and in human resources. And now, so you still want to be able to say, okay, you know, finances should be able to look at all the invoices across a company. Human resources should be able to look at, you know, performance reviews and all that human resources stuff. So you want to be able to express that. So that doesn't work in terms of ownership, because I want all those invoices should be viewable by everyone in finance. And it doesn't work in terms of roles, because you don't necessarily want to say that everyone who works in finance is above everyone who works in human resources, or the other way around. So there needs to be some other way of doing that. And indeed there is. So this is where we get into the world of ownership user groups and ownership formulae. I'll try and do it so you don't have to write any formulae. And I'll do it with an example, but you will see how this effectively writes the formula for you, and then you can sort of go ahead and experiment with different forms. We will do another video on formulae, so you may just want to, we're just going to look at this and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so let's say our blog, we're staying with our blog example. Let's say you have some topics. And this is, you know, whatever, name, this is the name of the topic. And we have now, we don't actually need another field, but we now need some rows here, and a topic is, you know, one topic is baking, and another topic is, you know, outdoors, like hiking and stuff like that. Okay, so now I can, and I want to say that some users are editors within this category. So now I'm going to create a group of people who are the editors of the baking session, and they will be able to edit the baking topics and vice versa for the outdoor section. All right, so we need another table, which is that, you know, topic editor, and that will have to have a user, so we'll call this the editor, and that needs to be key to users, and that's like we had before. I'll set this to cascade again, and then we need to link to the topic, so that you can just call the topic. That's okay to have the same name here. Actually, it's probably good practice to have plurals for the table. I don't know. Opinions vary massively, and you can do whatever you want. Just don't use a field called users. You can, but then sometimes that's shadowing certain variables and formulas, and it doesn't end well. Okay, so the topic, we'll cascade that as well. Okay, so now we have the ability to say that some users are the editors of certain topics. And you can build a user interface for this. I think we saw that in a different video, so I won't repeat it now. I'm just going to edit it here. So we're going to say that Tim is an editor for the baking topic. And now what we want, right? So what we need now, we also need to link the tables to the blog posts to a topic. So we need to have a topic here for each post, and this is a key to topic. This, you may want to set this to null. So now if we delete a topic, I don't think we necessarily want to delete all those posts. So, you know, what you use on delete is very much a question of taste. And I think here, it doesn't seem quite right that if we delete a topic, then we delete all of those posts. So just set null seems appropriate. But, you know, could be. So somebody has to make those decisions. And right, so now we have a topic, and now what we do is, so now I want to say that the owner, so forget about all this creator stuff. You can actually do both, so we will probably do that, but we'll start by just setting it so that it's owned by the topic editor. And there's a nice little, I spent some time writing these, so you better read them, please. So you can read all of these table roles. That's the same, but then there's a documentation topic for ownership field, and I guess I wrote a lot here, and a user group. You can read. Now every time I do this, I get confused. So when you need to make these choices, I just encourage you to have a reread of this little section, the example here, and it says. Designate the user works on project as a user group by checking the user group box. So in other words, we need to select that one table is a user group, and the one that the table that needs to be checked is the association table between, in this case, the project or the main entity and the user. So in our case, that is the topic editor, so that is the join table or the association table between topics and users that need to be checked as a user group. So like that. So now this is a user group. So now we have told Saltcorn that we've just designated this table as having somehow some relevant information about users being able to do something, but that in itself doesn't actually change anything. It's just a flag on this table for now. So now you might be tempted to go to your blog post, and now we're looking for something here, but there's nothing here, and that's because the entity that needs to be owned by a user group needs to be connected to that user group or by some chain of inheritances, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So this is not connected to anything in the topic editor table. It doesn't have a key to it. So what we need to do is first of all go to the topics. So this topic editor here, the association table, that is the user group, and this is the main entity that the topic is what in the first instance needs to be owned. So here we have in topic editor user group by topic, and that's what you need to choose. So by choosing this for the ownership field, you are saying that the topics are owned by anyone who is connected to that topic via the topic editor user group. That is anyone who has an entry with their user in the topic editor table. And now this is where there's a small difference between Firefox and Chrome. In Chrome you can just reload and see what happens. In Firefox you can't. They treat forms slightly differently. You just need to go somewhere and then come back. And now you see how we've cheated. You see how this is implemented. So in fact, the ownership field is a formula, and this is the formula. And it's a little bit intimidating, I know that. So that's why I wrote it for you, right? So Saltcorn has set this for you, and it makes a little comment saying that that's because what that means, that's the user group topic editor. Okay, so now the user, the ownership of the topics has been set, but that's not really what we wanted. We wanted to set the ownership of the blog posts, and we have this here as creator, but now here we are able to choose inherit topic, and that now means that so again here, let's just see. So I can't just reload because I'm in Firefox, but let's just go back here and see what this formula is. So you can, if you know JavaScript, you can recognize some of these things. There's a map and it includes. But moreover, what that means is that A blog post derives its or inherits its ownership from the topic it's tied to, and that topic in itself is owned by the user group topic editor, which is a many-to-many tape association between users and the topics. So some topics are owned by some users, and now what you can have is, what we wanted to do was to be able to have more than one user that's an owner of a certain blog post, and you can now have more than one row, right? So we can now have, so Tim is baking, but Sam is also baking, right? So now we have, you know, two owners of any baking related blog post. So I know that going to user groups is more complicated, and it, you know, necessarily involves these formula that hopefully we've written them for you, so that should make it a little bit easier. So things do become more complicated most of the time. I hope you could get away with ownership fields, but this is here. You have the other example in the documentation here with a project management application, and then you use inheritance to extend that to anything that's owned by the user group. So I hope that makes sense, and I'd encourage you to experiment with this and see if you can put all of your user permissions into this scheme. Now, if you can't, then there is always the option of a completely freestanding formula, right? So you can set here anything here. You can write anything here. This can be any JavaScript expression. We haven't covered that yet, but this is complicated because it involves some telling Saltcorn what fields we need to dig out, but you can just write anything that's a valid JavaScript expression. So if I wanted to go back and say the creator, I can also have ownership if I'm the creator, right? We had this creator field. If I say, okay, either I can own this row and therefore be allowed to edit it if I am in the user group for the topic, or if I'm the creator, then I should also be allowed to create it. So now I can say or, and then I say creator equals user.id. Here it's good to have question mark because that deals with it if there is no user. In some situations you can have a crash, but this, if you just say user.id, because if there is no user, then you're accessing the field on something that's undefined. So if you put a question mark here, then you have dealt with that. So this is another way of sort of extending that, and now you're completely flexible, right? So anything that can be in a formula in a JavaScript expression that can be tested and evaluate to a Boolean variable can now test if your row is owned by that user.